No, not yet. I will introduce you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear class, welcome one and all, and I'm glad to welcome you again to our next lecture. Today, the 15th day of April, Wednesday, 2020. Our lecturer is all the way in Savannah, Georgia, in the United States of America. It's 10 minutes past 11 our time. Professor Alejandro Gallard has 6 a.m. So he has to wake up early in the morning to be able to give us this lecture. I will introduce him in a moment. Meantime, I'd like to let him know that we have students from Nigeria, from Ghana, from Burundi, from DRC, several countries in East and Central Africa. And of course, we have 10 vice chancellors in the house. Vice chancellors are like presidents of American universities. So
you don't have to share me anymore, okay?
So we're very lucky to have such a rich class. And also, we have a center of excellence in Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. That center of excellence has to do with engineering education. It's Africa Center of Excellence. And the center leader, Professor Raymond Bako, is also with us. The reason why we are bringing Professor Bako and also to ask Professor Johnson to join us is that we have these 3 centers of excellence in STEM education in Nigeria. And the World Bank will want us to collaborate, to partner, to share resources. So the idea is for Professor Bako to see what we are doing, we see what he's doing, and we'll look at areas of collaboration and partnership. Very importantly, again, is that we have the cultural techno-contextual approach. Good enough, you're going to be hearing about contextual mitigating factors in this lecture. The CTC approach is the centerpiece of our work in our center in Lagos State University. The chapel approach is the centerpiece of the work in Ahmadu Bello University, the ACE there. So we want to be able to conduct joint studies where we look at the relative effectiveness of CTC approach and chapel approach in doing whatever, in promoting engineering education or performance of students in engineering or in science or in technology and in mathematics. That said, ladies and gentlemen, let me now introduce our speaker from Savannah, Georgia. Just give me a minute and I will introduce him.
A very important person. That's not
yes,
me.
The person I'm introducing, who is just talking at the background, is Dr. Alejandro Gallard. Mind how I pronounce the name. I didn't say Alejandro. Spanish pronunciation is Alejandro Gallard. He's a professor and Goizueta Distinguished Chair, Georgia Southern University in the U.S. His research interests include researching societal complexities promulgated by intersectoral contextual mitigating factors, CMF, that contribute to designated underrepresented students' lack of success or success in general, and the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics and STEM fields in particular. Through the lenses of complexity, positionality, and situatedness within social spaces, its foci are to understand education in relation to differences associated with ethnicity, gender, race, and socioeconomic status. Its sociocultural frameworks also include global perspectives on differences, otherness, a polyphony of voices, polysemy, and meaning making that reflects categories used to situate people in society. Last year, almost exactly a year ago, that's April 3rd, March 4th in 2019, at the 92nd annual meeting of the world's #1 group of science educators. That's the National Association of Research in Science Teaching. Alejandro and I took this picture with one of my grandchildren, Araulua. And
Yes.
Alejandro and I were co-chairs of NAST, the most elite committee. I was chair before him, and then he joined me to be co-chair. And then when I finished my term, he then became chair or co-chair of that committee. It's my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome Alejandro, Professor Alejandro Gallard, to make his presentation. Yeah, you can share your screen now, Alejandro.
Okay.
Yes. You do slideshow on this one.
You see it? Can you see it?
Go to slide. We can see you. Go to slideshow. Slideshow.
I'm on slide 2 now. Can you see it?
Slideshow. Slideshow. You are just the normal view. You have to do slideshow.
Yeah, okay. Hold
right,
on.
yeah.
I thank you for your patience. You're supposed to say you're welcome, Peter.
Okay, you are welcome. I've said so on behalf of the class.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your for everyone's patience here. I apologize again for being late. It really was an honest error on my part. I thought it was going to be 11 o'clock, so much so that I have 2 defenses this morning that I moved back 2 hours so I could accommodate this class. And my good friend, Professor Peter A. Okebukula, who I sincerely call a good friend, and I sincerely call him a good colleague, and I sincerely think of him as a good person. And so it's a double pleasure for me, and it's a double privilege. But this morning, as I was walking, getting my newspaper and coming back into the house, I kept thinking to myself about all of you and some of the lessons that you have had in these classes, and just how wonderful this has been set up. So I want to say something to you. Number one, I'm a little different. It is not different in the sense that I'm an odd person, only different in the sense of how I look at research. Several years ago, a few decades ago, I had the privilege of sitting with 2 colleagues of mine in science education. And with these 2 colleagues, one of them was the father of constructivism within science education. And the father of constructivism, he asked me a simple question. He asked me, he says, "Do you know what is in my mind?" And I looked at him and I said, "No, sir, I don't know what's in your mind." And he says, "Do you know that other researchers think that they know what's in my mind?" And I said, "That I am aware of." Then he asked me a second question. He said, "Do you think you're smart enough to define reality?" And I looked at him because all of these years prior to this, I had been trained in the scientific enterprise. So I said to him very naively, I said to him, "I think that if I can get an N large enough, I can define reality." And then he stunned me. He asked me one last question. He says, "Do you think you have more power than God?" And I stopped. And obviously I didn't answer. And that was my road to my thinking and my new directions in research, et cetera. So I would like for everyone to please take a few minutes to read these 2 sentences, because these 2 paragraphs, are my guiding philosophies. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes, 4 minutes to read this. And all of you are very, how do I say this? Are very smart and very quick readers. Whoops, I'm so sorry. There. I would like to discuss the first paragraph with you very quickly. What is it that we know? Or what is it that we think we know? And so I can take the approach of saying to you that I'd like to think of myself as a humble person. I am in many ways a humble person, but I'm more intimidated by my ignorance of the world around me. Even though I can see the world around me, I can make sense of the world around me, I am still ignorant of the world around me, and that intimidates me quite a lot. And it intimidates me because of that first paragraph, and that is that my eyes are blinded by the notion of positivism, by the notion of that we make assumptions about a people's realities, or some methods of education research makes assumptions about people's realities. And we should never make assumptions about people's realities. And the second paragraph comes from Kuhn and his book, The Structure of a Scientific Revolution. And this is the ideas that the same methods we use to create a reality are the same methods we use to dispel that reality has me mystified. In other words, we use to make something up, t-tests, to create a sense of reality, but we use those same t-tests to create another sense of reality that competes with that other sense of reality. And that makes me think, why do we keep using these t-tests just to make something up? We could go ad nova, we can say all sorts of different things, Spearman's row, etc. But why do we keep using these same methods? Why don't we think and try to come across with other methods? So this raises many questions, and these are my principles when I do sociocultural research. What assumptions do I make about the realities of others? And that's a question that I direct to you as vice chancellors, as professors, as well-known researchers. What is it that you think you know about other people, but that in reality you don't know? What is it that you think you know about students when they come and sit in a classroom that in reality you have absolutely no idea about? How can you make those realities explicit? And if we think of education research as being driven paradigmatically, what needs to change? The methods that we use are driven paradigmatically. There are certain methods that are used. Those of you who are involved in policy making, if I were to come to you with an N of one and I was going to say to you that Dr. Okabukula is a very nice person, but he likes to eat too much. He doesn't. I'm just making this up. He likes to eat this too much.
But you are correct. I like to eat too much. You are correct.
But he likes to eat too much. And I think that we need to develop a policy for Nigerians or whatever country you're from to try to get them not to eat too much. You're going to run me out of your office. What do you mean? You want me to make a policy on one person? Well, of course, you have every right to run me out of the office. The problem is that when you make a policy with a much larger N, the question then becomes, what are you hiding contextually? What is it that you don't know about the contextual reality of people? So if we expect reformation, or I dare say transformation, then why do we continue to sustain entrenched paradigms that homogenize students? We are not. Now I want you to really listen to this. We are not all the same. And I'm not talking about the obvious things. I'm not talking about some of you are males, some of you are females. I'm not talking about some of you are married, some of you are single, some of you are young, some of you are old. No, those are not what I'm talking about, and they're silly, superficial characteristics. What I am talking about is that every single one of us have had a unique, extremely unique individual experience getting to where we are. The question then becomes, how do I capture that experience? How can I reveal the trials and tribulations of Alejandro? What general patterns exist in those trials and tribulations, but you can't get to general patterns until you understand the individual patterns. And again, why do we use the same methods to credit a phenomenon as we do to discredit one? That is, one of the things that happens in the United States is we are always in need of science education professors, especially science education professors of color or ethnicity. When the search committees meet, they always come up with, well, we couldn't find any candidates. And I'm always amazed at that because I know several science educators of colors who have never been reached out to. And so I posed the question, can we change how we do our search and how we hold our search committees meetings? And the answer is no. And so it comes back to, why do we keep doing things the way we do things? Why don't we change the methods to try to really get at what's going on? Does the research I read make more explicit my experiences, or does it ignore them? That's very, very, very important for me because that's how I understand the world. Does my research contribute to the creation of new images for the teaching and learning of science that lead to scientific literacy in general? Ladies and gentlemen, we're in COVID right now world, the coronavirus 19 world. So we are very successful as science professors and as science educators at getting students to pass science classes. Yes, there are some students that fail, but most of our students pass these classes. So I have to assume that students who pass classes of biology, chemistry, physics, mathematics, geology, etc., that there is a sense of scientific literacy within these students. And somehow or another, the society that has taken general science courses also has a sense of scientific literacy. But this COVID virus has raised one question. If we're doing such a good job and our society does have some scientific literacy, then why do we have so many idiots on the beaches packed together? Why is it that they don't take what they know and apply it to the current situation? I don't know. To understand that research and science education falls under one or two following. These are my objectives here. You can read them, but I can tell you. And it falls under two philosophical frames. One is positivism. And that's what most of you are accustomed to, is positivism. Okay? And here it's a system that every rational, justifiable assertion can be scientifically verified or is capable of logic or mathematical proof. Don't reduce me to a number, because that's what you're trying to do. You're reducing me to a number. And the moment that you reduce me to a number, I lose my dignity. I lose my identity. I lose my character. I lose myself. Or you have tried to take it away from me. And so the other form of education research is sociocultural. And that is the understanding that all learning is a result of life experiences, which are a result of the self interacting with the world. And I just finished writing a column on learning. And I want to say one thing to you, and please take this. If you learn anything, learn this. Learning, for one to learn, it is an emotional act. In other words, what you're presenting is in direct contradiction to what the person knows. And so there's this clash. And one of two things happen. One, the person memorizes, takes the test and dismisses you and holds on to their beliefs, or the person, because of the way that you approach them, makes themselves vulnerable and allows this new learning to come into their lives. You can stop me at any time if you want to. And here are my other objectives, okay? And that CMS are contextual mitigating factors. Look, educational research is not scientific research, because it takes place in sociocultural contexts that are constantly mitigated by a host of cultural, economic, historical, and political contextual mitigating factors. that are dynamic and constant change. And towards the end of this talk, I talk about two professors of science education from Nigeria. And one of them is here supervising me right now. They do not do their work without taking in consideration the historical aspects. And if you think about education in any one of your countries, it doesn't particularly matter to me which one it is. I would dare say the following, that for you to ignore the historical and political and contextual, cultural, et cetera, to include various multiple languages, multiple ways of being, et cetera, then the only thing that you're doing is you're hiding the obvious. And perhaps you're hiding the obvious because you don't know how to take care of the obvious, how to handle the obvious. I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that education and professors of education and teachers of education have been for a couple of decades being deprofessionalized. And I think that part of the deprofessionalization comes from ourselves in that it has become so complex today, the classroom, given immigration that is going on, given the continual and larger divide, social economic divide, continuing the good schools and the bad schools, continuing the confusion as to the function of education, et cetera. That's one of all of those issues are issues that constantly change what's going on and have a very large grip on us. And they're a continuous set of socio-historical, political constructs which are fluid and dynamic, interweaving community, education, family, gender identity, and other socially constructed domains. Knowledge is a social construction. Please understand that. And one thing that I really would like for you also to understand, each data point is constantly positioned and situated by a host of CMS. There is no such thing as any one data point that has not been positioned and situated by a host of CMS. So what are these CMS? Some of the macrogenic themes as contextual mitigating factors that position and situate all the time in social spaces are social underpinnings of science education, the function of education, education policy, neoliberalism, global influences on education and science education, and in education research. I became a professor not, and again, one more not to please the private sector. I became a professor because I wanted people to think. I wanted to be able to share what I know and to be able to pique the interest of other people into thinking about things. In my work, I understand the function of education. There is the policymaker's function of education. There is the parent or home function of education, and there is the teacher's function of education. All three of them are clashing all the time with each other. And as long as things are clashing, then they become an influence on the actions that we take. The mesogenic themes, underrepresentation in the teaching and learning of sciences. In your countries, it is more of a gender issue and an ethnicity issue, I would say, and perhaps even a social economic. That's what the SES stands for. In the United States, it's more of an underrepresentation. It is not by accident that most Black and brown folk, and I'm a brown person, that most Black and brown folk are not well represented in the STEM fields. That is not by accident, because race is a contextual mitigating factor. Poverty is a contextual mitigating factor. And all of these intersect, position us, situate us within these special social spaces, rather. And they're perpetuated by doxas, which simply means myths that somehow or another society has come about to believe that they are the truth. And some of those myths, if you remember in the Stanford studies, where this well-published, peer-reviewed guide did a lot of work proving that Black people have different brains than non-Black people. That work was accepted, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. is there's a reason why by second grade or third grade, most females are washed out of the mathematic tracks that are, or the conceptual understanding of mathematics for them to go on to become, if they choose to have a STEM career. And so in the microgenic, bringing it down some more, we do have this underrepresentation by gender and ethnicity in the sciences and engineering. In my case, it's Latinas, which are female Hispanics. Language is very important. Sans pratique. Sans pratique in our work has become very critical. And that is that people, it's a Bourdieu term in that it means learning how to read the social landscape. If there's one thing, my work is done around females, Latinas or Hispanic females who are successful in the science fields. We know a lot about why they aren't successful. We know very little about those women who are successful. And one of the things that to a person we have found is that this notion of sans pratique, they understand it. They know how to read the social landscape. They don't know what the word or the term means, but they do know how to read the social landscape, and they know how to identify those situations that can limit them. And then they develop this tactical understanding and a resilience. And a resilience isn't pulling yourself up. A resilience is finding different ways to minimize these limits situations, and this leads to an agency and empowerment and identity, etc. And so, look, there's something is wrong here. Now, if you think about this, look at this graph, for goodness sakes. Everyone comes into school, bright-eyed, eager to learn, etc. And look what happens at the end there. What has happened to all these people? Why is this flow so diminished, so constantly? And there's a constant diminishing. The higher up you go in school, it becomes more of a trickle, if you will. And I don't understand that. Am I going too fast?
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay, good.
You have 15 minutes.
Okay, all right. So I think it's important now I get into the NARS organization. There are two big organizations for research and science education. And one of them is NARS, and that's the one that Professor Okabukala and I belong to. And these are the different strands that people use to do their research. And you can see science learning, development, and student understanding. How students learn from a variety of theoretical perspectives. And you can go on through this list. We're fine going through this list. And I'm going to go on to the next page. Now, if you notice here, you see it says cultural, social, and gender issues. And what I find, and also another one, history, philosophy, sociology, and nature of science. What I find fascinating about all of these is that the cultural aspects, the social and gender issues, are like a sore thumb. In other words, all of the other ones are about, how do I say this? We have, for the last 10, 20 years, we have moved from teaching people science to trying to make little scientists starting in elementary school. And we need to get away from that. We need to go back to the idea that people want to learn science because they're curious. Why? How can we be so successful at killing that curiosity? I don't know. So most of these are about the creation of little scientists. Most of these, the research methods that they use are acontextual, meaning they ignore the context. Now, let me go on. And the Association for Science Teacher Education, ASTE, these are their areas of research. So if we look at the history and the nature of science, and it so happens I'm teaching a course on the history of science right now, what is always ignored is the past. And that always amazes me that the past is always ignored. Because, and precisely what is ignored in the past is how evolutionary science is. There's nothing stagnant about science, yet that's precisely how we teach it. This is all this is the world as defined by scientists, et cetera, et cetera. Why? And so a question comes in my mind, why do I have to have a category of equity and diversity? Why does that even need to exist if we're equitable people and if we do understand diversity? So these are two Nigerian science educators. It takes me great pride and pleasure to know the last one there. Did I misspell that? No, yeah, I did. I put an extra T in there, so I apologize there, Peter. Knowledge of the past gives an insight into events that culminated into the present and what the future is likely to bring. And so that simply means as you look at your data, what has the past done to influence this data? That's one question. A second question, which to me is equally as important, is what has the research methodology done to hide that past? Because believe it or not, the past always influenced the present and the future. And Peter, Dr. Okabukula, I'm sorry, I'm being a little informal with you. The goal of any teacher is to ensure that students learn and learn meaningfully. That has its roots in the philosophy of education and John Dewey. And then when Dewey talks about, listen, not all experiences are good experiences. Not all experiences lead to learning. And so by meaningful learning, what Professor Okabukula is begging, the question that he's begging is, how can you help a student take what you're presenting to them and apply it in their everyday life? If you can't do that, then meaningful learning is not taking place. And I took so just read the red there. The theoretical frameworks may be different, but they're conscious of how the CMF of the past positions influence their scholarship today. And these are some other Nigerian science educators. I apologize. There are science educators from South Africa that I work with closely, and also from the eastern part of Africa that I work closely with. But this is just some of the broad spectrum of the investigations that are going on to give you an idea. So I'm going to leave you with some thinking. Some of you are very smart. Some of you are not so smart. But all of us are surrounded by people who are smarter than us. And so I want to go back. That brings me back. I'm humbled by that notion. But I am intimidated by my ignorance. If there's one thing that brings me to my knees is my ignorance. And the reason it brings me to my knees is that it makes me conscious, very, very conscious of how blind I really am to the things that are going on around me. I did not know, for example, being brought up in a family that Latinos were like many South African nations or people of South Africa. I'm going to make this assumption, certainly like the Nigerians, in that close-knit families. I would look at white people and I was always amazed. I never forget the first time a white person told me that they were visiting their cousin. And I was so amazed by that. I turned around, I was young, and I asked, you people have cousins? I had absolutely no idea that people other than ourselves had cousins or aunts and uncles, etc. And so all of that blinds me. I am where I am because of three moments. A small handful of people believed in me, and that's very critical. I would not be speaking with you if Dr. Okabukula did not believe in me. It has nothing to do with friendship. It has nothing to do with anything other than a belief in a person. And it's very critical for you to understand who has believed in you. You are not where you are because of yourself. You are where you are because somebody maybe 1, 2, 3 people believed in you. You're just not that good to be where you are alone. No one is. The other thing that was very, very important for me was I learned how to believe in myself. And the reason I learned how to believe in myself is I started, how do I say this? I started to listen, which is called to learn. I didn't listen, no longer listen to see if a person was right or wrong or anything else like that. I now listen to people to see what can I learn from them and how what they are saying to me, how can I somehow or another incorporate it into my life? If indeed I want to incorporate it into my life, which then leads me to the next one, which is learn to question. That's why I listen to learn, because it teaches me to question. To be truthful means to employ the usual metaphors. That's a Nietzsche saying. And what that simply means is, if the best you can do in life is to use the paradigmatic, approved ways of doing things, then you are being truthful only because the status quo says you are being truthful, and for no other reason. If you don't understand what I'm saying, think about how some of you may be reacting to my presentation. Think of how some of you may feel like I've got nails going across a chalkboard, because a lot of my presentation is directly challenging some of the ways of thinking that are going on. And that's why it's very, very critical to know thyself. Understand your epistemology, your ontology, your axiology. How is it that you define the world? How is it that you look at the world? Because that worldview, as they say, determines how you look at everything in life, determines every decision you make. And so I'm going to try this.
1 minute, yeah, okay.
Nangoleda mar de acá samuna saluadaku. Gracias por el privilegio de reunirme con ustedes. Thank you for the privilege of meeting with you, Alejandro.
Thank you.
So,
Wow. Oh, wonderful. It's just
although I noticed one person was yawning. I won't say who she is.
it was just 5 minutes to 12 noon, and we're all alive and well and excited about the lecture which you just gave, Alejandro. The heart of the matter is that it's an individual thing. Learning is an individual thing, and it's one that you have to recognize others within the learning setting. Know thyself. Know thyself. And there's one other underlining theme in your presentation is that the contextual mitigating factors will either make or mar you in your march towards success in STEM. I like that figure, that illustration. Many people have the capacity to learn and do well in STEM, but these contextual mitigating factors, race, ethnicity, gender, all of that will now lead to the trickle. So my question for you, Alejandro, is what do we do about the mitigating factors? You have the different levels. Why have 2 levels? One are the immutable mitigating factors. You can't change your sex, you can't change your ethnicity, but there are some other factors which are mitigating, which I didn't see on your list. The attitude of the learner to work. What I know, I don't have empirical data, is that, please just give me a minute. Just give me a minute. I don't have empirical data, is that some of the underrepresented groups, they do not have the motivation, the drive to aspire towards studying science. They know themselves, but they underrate themselves. So those are variable. I mean, those are variables that you can vary. You can't vary your sex. You can't vary your ethnicity. You can't vary maybe your geographical location, maybe that you can do that. But your attitude to work, attitude to science, that is a major one. It's a mitigating factor, which I would like you very briefly to address. I have an answer to it, but I would like you to address it. So let me open the floor for comments and questions on this topic.
You know what? Let me answer that real quickly.
No, Alejandro, take all of them together. Take all of them together. Yeah, okay, fine. So because we have 10 more minutes, we started 10 minutes late, so we're going to have in 10 minutes. Yes, if you want to ask a question, please so signify. I'm scrolling.
Yeah.
Emanuela, you have the floor. Emanuela, you have the
Thank
floor.
you. Thank you, Professor Okebukoda. Thank you, Professor Alejandro, for the presentation. I'm glad because this presentation, the one we had before and this one are somehow complementary.
Correct.
Because one was inviting us to be creative and use technology to fill gap in teaching methodology. And this one brings in the mitigating factors, which refer to the question that the Professor Andre, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, but the question was that there are some students who are not able to have access to the class to the chat, because she had sent them a topic to discuss. But now we can see that this is an economic factor that is interfering in our teaching process. Well, now, could you please put them together and then try to show us what kind of solution, because we know these are some of the impeding factors to our teaching processes or methodology. So what can we do?
Thank you, Emanuela. You know, I'm very proud of you. You are a very bright person, and you are very, very deep in thought. You have put everything together, and I very appreciate that. So, Professor Alejandro,
thank you.
is noting it. So let's have another, any other person who will want to take the floor. I'm scrolling now. Yes, if no other person is taking the floor, I'm going to ask Alejandro to address the two questions that...
I'm going to address two things at one time. The question that you raised in the sense of why students aren't motivated to learn science. I don't think that students are not motivated to learn science. I think all students are motivated to learn science. The real question to me is, what do we do as educators to dismotivate them? And in my own work that I do with Dr. Ramos Robles out of Mexico, what we found in youth is that there's a disenchantment, and suicide rates are going up. And the reasons suicide rates are going up is that many people, young students, and when I'm talking about young students, I'm talking about 20-year-olds, etc. They go to school with this grand vision that once they finish college, they will get a job and life will be secure for them, etc. And so they finish college, and what happens? There are no jobs. And so the complexity of this issue has to do with, just to give you an idea of the contextual mitigating factor, into intersectionality. In countries that do not invest, or that do invest in education and invest in getting jobs, they don't put the two together. You cannot keep investing in universities and developing scientists, and we're talking about scientists right now, and develop scientists if you don't also invest in the infrastructure of creating a scientific enterprise so that these people can work. In terms of the poverty issue, the problem that we have, and I'm going to shock you right now, I don't think there's anything wrong with numbers. That's never been my argument. What is always wrong with numbers is if you say to me 20% of the students are poor in a school, and of those 20%, 5 did well. Well, so what? I don't care that those 5 did well. The reason I don't care is not because I'm cold-hearted. No, it's because I don't understand poverty.
Yes, hello. Are we there? Am I the one freezing?
There are social-cultural reasons as to why their poverty is always maintained. Did I answer your question, Miss Esther, Dr. Esther? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's yeah. You really have you have done just that, Alejandro, and we're quite happy with your responses to our questions.
Can I ask one question?
Yes, go ahead, Alejandro.
All of the people who are looking very seriously at me, I just need to know, can you smile or something to make me feel good? Thank you very much. Okay.
Yeah, you can see they're all smiling. You know, I tell you what has happened. You see, they have enjoyed, they have been thoroughly soaked in the depth of the thinking, of the philosophy, your sociocultural viewpoint, that they are so delighted, so amazed. So that is why. You can see Professor Michael Ahove with a very nice smile. I can see him there smiling quite nicely. And the Vice Chancellor, Investor Ibadan, and others. So we have thoroughly enjoyed the presentation, Alejandro. And Professor Abdullah Badamu is there, our Vice Chancellor, who made his, his super presentation earlier. So I like for him to make a few comments as we round up this session. Vice Chancellor, let me unmute you.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I think what he talked about is very critical. And as Emanuela said, there is a confluence, a convergence between his broad views and my more specific views. Whereas he's more philosophical about how to go about delivering science, are much more practical in the sense of looking behind the scenes. And his perception, of our lemming-like behavior is similar to my own, where kids are programmed just simply to go and pass examination and so on, and they're not getting really ready for the world of work. All they want to do is pass the examination. And I think I see a lot of synergy between his theoretical perspective and my practical perspective. So the two of us complement each other, and I'm very proud of that.
Thank you so very much. Because Alejandro has a cap on, I've also decided to don a cap. Alejandro, just to tell you how happy we are from this part of the world.
Listen, I'm not trying to be rude, but see how my hair is just all over?
Yeah. Who told you I don't have hair all over too? I have hair all over.
I didn't want to embarrass you, Peter.
No, I tell you what. My barber was here yesterday to cut it down low. Before we end the session, I'd like the class to note that we are going to start a new program within the framework of our delivery system. And that is over the weekend, maybe on a Saturday, we're going to have a debate. There will be a topic for the debate, which we may start this weekend, a debate, and it's going to be between the Burundi group and the Nigerian group. And so the Burundi group be warming up to get your speakers. We have 3 speakers from each of the groups. University of Burundi, Professor Juma Shabani will organize you. We'll let you know the topic in a few days. And the Nigerian group will also come together. We will need 3 judges. I'll be the chief judge, and then we'll need 1 judge from, okay, Juma Shabani and I will be the chief judges, and then we'll get a judge from Burundi and a judge from Nigeria. Perhaps our center manager, Professor Rashid Sani, will be one of our judges. So you find it interesting. When we listen to something during the course of the week, we then come up with a debate, a topic for debate. We are doctoral students, we are master students. The idea of having a PhD, Doctor of Philosophy, is that you are philosophizing about your area of specialization. So we're deep thinkers. You'll notice that, and this has come up as a result of the topics that we heard delivered today. Professor Abdullah Damu took us through a wonderful, novel trajectory. Professor Alejandro Gallard took us through philosophical viewpoint that both of which have now stimulated, using the words of Emanuela, a confluence. We now come with a confluence. So we're going to start a debate. If you're in favor of the debate, just raise your hand. Just say you are in favor of the debate, weekly debate. We're going to have 1 hour debate between the two groups. Wonderful, that's it. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, let me bring this to a close, and thank you all for attending.
Peter, people's hands were going up.
Oh yeah, for the reason that they want to have the debate, and we're going to ask you to join the debate at some point.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do have political instincts.
Oh, I see.
And so I'm not sure,
Yes.
because I will have to choose a side. And so right now we'll tell you both sides have won.
Of course. That's both sides have won. Yeah. So what will happen from now? Today is Wednesday, so class is over at 10 minutes after 12. So you're free. By this evening, you are going to get the topic for a discussion forum. So you go to the class website. Those of you that have not been able to gain access to the class website, please send us a mail. Make sure you register first on the class website, and then we will enroll you for the 3 courses. On Thursday, that is from tomorrow, this evening till Thursday evening, you have your discussion. So come and contribute to the discussion forum till 6 p.m. On Friday, Friday afternoon, so Friday evening from I think 6 p.m. you are going to get a quiz in the 3 courses that we had this week. On Saturday, Professor Uche Udiani of University of Lagos did say that she has some challenge, but we'll see how we cover up that Saturday out. So from my end, I'd like to thank you all again, and I'm going to unmute everybody for us to give a round of applause to our presenters. So let us
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you,
Have a good day.
Nice
Yes, sir.
rest of the week, and
Hi, everybody.
so bye bye.
Okay, thank you.